Chapter 1 Stars, the Sea. The lamentations ended about noon. Some of the women had screamed and torn their hair. When they were gone, I went to see for myself. It was a small stone building by the cemetery in the hamlet called Chora Sfakion on the south coast of Crete, just a few houses scattered over the steep cliffs. I was 16. The tiny chapel had an opening, no door. In the half-dark within, I saw two corpses so close to each other they were touching. They were both men. Later I was told that they had killed each other in the night. In that remote, archaic part of the world, they still had the vendetta or blood vengeance. All I remember now is the face of the man on the right. It was lavender blue with splotches of yellow. Emerging from the nostrils were two enormous pads of cotton wool soaked full of blood. He had been hit in the chest with a load of buckshot. At nightfall, I went out to sea. I was working for a few nights on a fishing boat. It would have to have been on the few dark nights either side of the new moon. One boat towed 6 skiffs, called lampades, out to sea, each one of them with one man on board. There we were all dropped a couple of 100 yards apart and left to drift. The sea was as glossy smooth as silk, no waves. An immense silence. Each skiff had a big carbide lamp that was shining down into the deep. The lamp attracted the fish, especially cuttlefish. There was a strange method of fishing for them. At the end of a fishing line was a small shiny piece of wax paper about the size and shape of a cigarette. That attracted the cuttlefish, which grasped the booty in their tentacles. To help them hold on, the bait had a wire wreath fixed to it. You had to know just exactly how far down the lure was below the surface, because the instant the cuttlefish felt themselves being pulled up into the air, they would straightaway relinquish their booty and drop back into the water. You had to accelerate the last arm's length of line so that you were able to swing the cuttlefish into your skiff. The first few hours were spent in silent waiting until eventually the artificial moon of the lamp began to take effect. Above me was the orb of the cosmos, stars that I felt I could reach up and grab. Everything was rocking me in an infinite cradle. And below me, lit up brightly by the carbide lamp, was the depth of the ocean, as though the dome of the firmament formed a sphere with it. Instead of stars, there were lots of flashing silvery fish, bedded in a cosmos without compare, above, below, all around, a speechless silence. I found myself in a stunned surprise. I was certain that there and then I knew all there was to know. My fate had been revealed to me. And I knew that after one such night, it would be impossible for me to ever get any older. I was completely convinced I would never see my 18th birthday because, lit up by such grace as I now was, there could never be anything like ordinary time for me again. Chapter 2 El Alamein. Some time ago, in some papers, I came upon a postcard from my mother, dated September 6, 1942, and written in pencil. The stamp with Adolf Hitler's likeness was pre-printed on it. The postmark is clearly readable. Munich, Center of the Movement. The postcard is addressed to Herr Professor Dr. R. Herzog and family, Großhesselohe near Munich. To my grandfather, then Rudolf Herzog, the patriarch of the family. My mother chose not to inform my father. "Dear father," she writes to my grandfather, "I want to tell you that I gave birth last night to a baby boy. He is to be named Werner. Best wishes, Liesel." My given name Werner was an act of insubordination against my father, who wanted me to be called Eberhard. At the time of my birth, my father was a soldier in France, not at any front, but because he knew how to make himself scarce behind the lines where supplies were distributed, specifically food rations. He had sired me in the course of his most recent, no doubt hard-earned furlough shortly after the new year. My mother later discovered that he had spent the first part of his 10 days' leave with some other woman and presented himself afterward. I was born just before the turning point of the Second World War. In the east, the German Wehrmacht was laying siege to Stalingrad, which was to lead to a catastrophic German defeat within months. While in North Africa, General Rommel was trying to push through to El Alamein, which would soon lead to a similar debacle for the so-called Thousand-Year Reich. Much later, when I was 23 and had to leave the United States in a hurry because I had violated the terms of my visa and was on the point of being expatriated back to Germany, I fled to Mexico, where I had to find some way of earning money for a living. I worked in the charreadas, a Mexican form of rodeo, as a kind of arena clown, riding on young bullocks, even though I'd never even ridden a horse before. My chosen sobriquet was El Alamein, because no one could say my real name, and for simplicity's sake referred to me as El Aleman, or the German.